This is a presentation of Universal 7 Governance and Management. Ashby's Law, and the virulent attack on America's identity. The United States is under attack by its domestic enemies. The attack is focused on America's identity, as established in the U.S. Constitution. It is a crucial leverage point for destroying the system from within. The United States of America, with its vast territory, wealth and power, is seen as an obstacle to the progressive socialist globalist agenda. Let's show how this attack is taking place. In the end, it is all about controlling the minds of the American people. After trying to work for some years, under the rules of a confederacy, the United States of America finally self-organized in 1787, with the ratification of the United States Constitution. The identity of the United States is clearly defined in the text of the Constitution. It reads, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution, for the United States of America." We will show that it is a structural attack, targeting every systemic function that makes it work as a viable system. We shall use universal governance and Ashby's Law as a guide. Law has applied syllogistic logic for ages, but the United States Constitution is a prime example of the need for circular causality and feedback. This is how it attempts to solve problems, both external and domestic. Call it successive approximations, in a never-ending process of adaptation. Because of the adaptive nature of its structure, we can safely assert that the United States was created in a way that fits the definition of a viable system. It has a population, with a territory and its own government. As such, it follows the laws and principles of organizational cybernetics, as discovered by Professor Stafford Beer. We shall use the Universal 7 Governance and Management System as a reference model. Paradoxically, behind these attacks are its domestic enemies, taking advantage of the freedoms that the Constitution provides and protects. Here is a graphical representation of the 13 colonies in the mid-1700s. A delegation from each state participated in the creation of a new form of republican government. This is a highly convenient and exhaustive way to represent the structure of the United States and its founding document, the Constitution, which is its blueprint. This model is built using Ashby's Law of Control. It is present in every control connection. Ashby's Law of Requisite Variety is a universal law of control, expressed in the most simple and abstract terms. It says only variety absorbs variety. Detecting Ashby's Law is a practical way of identifying the structure of the U.S. government, and its sources of cohesion and control. The constitutional framework is full of self-balancing control loops, all throughout its text. Here is a first example. If we map the U.S. Constitution as a black box, the first thing we notice is that it embodies Ashby's Law. As illustrated in this input-output graph, the citizens and ups are processed and turned into outputs, which go to impact themselves as the governed. Therefore, the idea of a U.S. citizen involves a duality. Citizens are the origin of all power, and at the same time the recipients of exercised power. Those that govern at the highest level and the governed at the lowest level are exactly the same people. For this reason, we can say that the U.S. Constitution operates according to Ashby's Law. Only variety absorbs variety, and the citizens are situated on both ends of the control equation. They must absorb their own variety. Ashby's Law is reflected by the Golden Rule and Christian principle, whereby you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That takes care of the variety equation, as a fundamental constitutional principle applied at this level. The next thing to notice is the recursive structure. The 13 colonies have the same structure as the collective whole. Now we turn our attention to the identity systemic function. It says what the organization is about, states its purpose and values. This is a function performed by we the people. As you might know, the VSM model is built on the idea that the identity of the system is the basic building block, the contractual setup of the organization. Identity sets the goals and the values accompanying to those goals. In the United States it was, we the people in the Constitution and the pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. The U.S. government was built to achieve that goal. That is the shared identity. The systemic function in care of planning, meaning long-term adaptation and learning, is the Constitutional Convention itself. The Constitutional Convention gave itself the power to reappear later on in the future, if needed, to amend the Constitution. This first level of the governance structure is seldom used. The Constitutional Convention was also in charge of designing the rest of the structure, in the name of the people. It agreed to create a limited federal government, operating in the day-to-day affairs of the United States, under the separation of powers principle. Those three powers are the legislative, the executive and the judicial branches. It is clear at this point that if something goes wrong, it is up to the citizens of the United States, following the Constitution, to amend its text in the future. It is expressly written in the document that these changes do not include its own destruction. Article 6 of the Constitution requires officials to take an oath to support this Constitution. Today, 5 U.S. C. 3331 specifies the language of the oath for federal officials. According to this statute, officials must solemnly swear, or affirm, that they will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that they will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. This other graph illustrates a second recursion level of the governance model, where the day-to-day federal government operates. Notice the changes. The identity function of the federal government, not the nation, is now held by the people who vote in a federal election. They choose a Congress, which is now the planning, adaptation and learning systemic function for this recursion level. Representatives are elected every 2 years, and 2 senators for each state of the Union are elected every 6 years. Here again, we see the balancing act of Ashby's law being put to good use. The Bicameral Congress was the product of a group headed by Elbridge Gerry, called the Great Compromise. This group broke the stalemate originated by the states with larger populations that did not want to be underrepresented. At this level, the judiciary is clearly seen as taking the role of the error detection function for the whole federal system. It settles issues between the Congress and the executive, and between the citizens against the laws approved by Congress, and ungrounded executive actions. However, under the limited government principle, the federal structure works only within its delegated power, which are expressly granted. The remaining or original jurisdiction, shown now in salmon, belongs to the states, who were actually the parties to the agreement to create the Constitution in the first place. The constitutional principles can be pictured as 2 self-reinforcing loops, running in opposite directions. All this, again, to meet what the requisite variety equation demands. This is an arrangement where individual freedoms belong to a new sovereign, the people of the United States. As they make use of their individual freedoms, the people play a central role in creating and maintaining the system running. The 7 organizing principles describe a process. It starts with number 1. Popular sovereignty is expressed in the Constitution, and establishes number 2, a limited government. This government takes the shape of a, number 3, federal representative democracy, which is organized using the number 4, separation of powers. It sets the controls through a series of number 5, checks and balances. This way, legislation is produced which is subject number 6, to judicial review. This is to guarantee, number 7, individual freedoms and obligations. Elections provide corrective feedback as shown in this flowchart. Here are the 7 organizing principles of the Constitution, and how they come together to form a viable system, with open elections as a mechanism for adaptation. Number 1, the popular sovereignty principle, shown at the top. This principle means that the people command the government for their own good. This principle is then followed by number 2, limited government, which in turn adopts principle number 3, in the form of a federal representative democracy. Further elaboration of internal controls favors principle number 4, separation of powers. Principle number 5 conforms a system of checks and balances among those powers. The legislative outcome can be subjected to principle number 6, judicial review. As beneficiaries of the legislation, the people can defend their inalienable rights, also known as 7, individual freedoms, through which they create and set up the government in the first place. This closes the governance loop. This is the same graph seen in another way, now expressed in terms of Ashby's law. The individual rights on the right side balance the government structures on the left. Judicial interpretation is meant to keep a fair balance between the people and the powers of the government. In the original constitutional structure, the mass media, highlighted in gold, and the freedom of the press, are an integral part of the people's defense mechanism that keeps the government in check. However, the key variable is personal freedoms. This is the glue for the whole system. The whole structure of the US Constitution is built on this key variable. That was true until the globalists started the attack. The mass media switched sides, and the results are for everyone to see. Led by the mainstream media, every principle of government has been under attack for some time. Following the graph, number 1. It starts with the media switching roles and playing for the globalist team. Number 2. Mainstream media supports an opaque election. This opens the door to some chaos, and forces us to talk about self-organizing systems. We remember Stafford Beer's famous dictum: "The purpose of a system is what it does." These words are a key to becoming an effective manager or keen political leader. You do not want to ever confuse intentions with reality. The results of the 2020 election is an output of a complex system, and probably a system failure. Highly complex systems tend to self-organize, and acquire what appears to be a purpose of their own. Sometimes these attractor systems can become dangerous, and are impossible to stop. Tornadoes are self-organizing. Social systems may also carry a surprise element, and gather strength before people realize what is going on. What Rudolph Giuliani failed to recognize is that electoral fraud at a national level is possible, acting as a typical self-organizing system. The idea of a huge conspiracy was frowned at. I have had plenty of experience fighting electoral fraud. Fraud can take place as the product of many individual efforts lacking any central planning. The effort becomes a complex adaptive system. Several populations of agents share the same goal. The successful actions of some agents are copied by other agents in the system pursuing the same goal: defeat Trump. For instance, the demand for mail-in ballots amid the COVID-19 scare spread like wildfire, and quickly evaded the existing precarious electoral safeguards and the unpreparedness of state legislatures. Vote harvesting is illegal. However, usurping the functions of election officials was totally ignored by the courts. This added fuel to the fire. At the social level, attractors are a good explanation of why things happen that are not planned by anyone from start to finish. Vortices that work as giant attractors appear everywhere all the time. A fair amount of these accelerated social vortices create the sensation that they are the product of a conspiracy. Not necessarily. It may be, however, that several forces align themselves in a complementary direction, creating this vortex effect. Another example is the demonstration in the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. It has been characterized as an insurrection against the government, but nobody planned what happened there. President Trump got them there, but Nancy Pelosi let them into the Capitol building on purpose. Again, the purpose of a system is what the system does. Step 3. The mainstream media also supports invasive, unlimited government. Step 4. Due process is under attack. The Capitol rioters in prison are being dispossessed of their human rights. The system is chasing and punishing the protesters very harshly. Instead of offering a pardon and balancing the equation, the government is dividing the country farther apart. The rioters of the summer of 2020 are allowed to go free. New York stops requiring bail. The truth is, complex systems, such as a social system at a national level, may display emergent and therefore surprising properties, and produce unexpected results, good and bad. A good manager or competent government would make sure that this pathological condition does not accelerate any further, and is reversed as soon as possible. That is not happening in America's identity attack, which seems to be deliberate on behalf of many of the political actors. Step 5. Congress either burdened by special interests, or suffers paralysis by analysis. Debates become very long and destructive. 6. The executive started his term, issuing dozens of executive orders. The COVID-19 crisis currently appears being used as a leverage factor, or high-gain amplifier. This is done by groups of people and organizations that have been pushing the globalist agenda. I am not saying that they released the virus on the world on purpose, but I cannot blame others who are suspicious. There is a connection between that event and the way it is being handled. Deliberate or not, the policies that are being enforced are conducive to a state of chaos that is destroying the social fabric in unprecedented ways and at a speed not thought possible. Children are forced to wear masks at school. You see the attacks on the symbols. They're people toppling public monuments with impunity. Disrespecting the national anthem is a common occurrence. Marijuana is approved and labeled as recreational. Number 7. An oversized federal government asks for trillions of dollars for spending programs. In the economic front there is high inflation, tax hikes, easy COVID relief money, disincentivizing work, more government spending, unattended supply chain collapse, energy dependency on oil from the Middle East. Inflation is surging at a rapid pace. Number 8. There is a plan for packing the Supreme Court. Attacks on religious freedoms, 9, and gun rights, 10, are constant. In top of all that, the president refuses to answer direct questions. The big question is, how will the social system respond in the 2022 elections? A. Citizens take control of the feedback function, and neutralize the government. They rebalance the control equation whose output is personal freedom. Or B. Resignation prevails, and citizens accept total government control. A new system of government emerges.